Shulam Aleichem, everybody. Agmar Chasim Atoiva. Agid Geben Shtur. Today's daf. At the time of the recording, we couldn't record in Rosh Hashanah, but we'll catch up now. Is Daf Ches. We start from Daf Zayin at Beis, 2 lines from the bottom. The Mishnah said that a chatas shaloi lishma is possible. Unlike other karbonas, kol Zvachim shenizbuchu shaloi lishma is ksherim. But a chatas is possible. Asks the Gemara, chatas menolan. How do we know that chatas is different, that it's possible? The chsiv, v'shochat oisal lechatas. Torah says you should shecht her lechatas for a chatas. She shchita l'shem chatas. That the shchita should be l'shem chatas. Yeah, v'shochat oisal lechatas. The shchita should be for the chatas, for l'shem chatas. Ashkan shchita kabbalah menolan hadra kabbalah. The chsiv said in the Torah also, "V'lokach hakohen midam hachatos." Right? Rashi's lokach is loshen kabbalahu, and it says midam hachatos tehi kabbalah l'shem chatos. Again, the Torah repeats chatos by kabbalah to tell you that the kabbalah has to be l'shem chatos also. But ashkan shchita v'kabbalah zrika menolan. How do I zrika? The omer krav v'chipar olav hakohen mechatosoi shetei kapara l'shem chatos. Torah says again, v'chipar is always zrika because the ikar kapara is b'zrika. So it says there again, mechatosoi, which means that the kapara should be l'shem chatos. What about hoilocha? Rashi right away says, top line, hoilocha le'itztrich kra. Yeah, the b'chal kabbalah hi misrabilei. Hoilocha is b'chal kabbalah. Tosfos here says, harbi yesh tema. It's a great wonder. There's a lot to wonder over here, Tosfos says. Why the Gemara by Zrika brings a pasuk from the chatas of Shmi Askola Bitus Vasayim. It's a different parsha. Why not stick to chatas chayla, the chatas yochid? The previous psukim, b'shochat oisal chatas and melokach hakoyim medam chatas, is talking about chatas chaylev. Right at the end of Vayikra, Parshas Vayikra, and over here Shmi Askola Bitus Vasayim is a whole different parsha of chatas. I mean, it's still in Parshas Vayikra at the end, but it's a special chatas of a carbon oil of a yored. Why are we jumping to that pasuk? Tosfos says there's actually a pasuk by Chatas Chaylev itself. It says v'chipur olav hakohen al chatasai asher chatos. So the chipur al chatasai means that you have to have the kapara the zrika l'shem chatas. Anyways, Tosfos says that it could be that the al chatas of chipur olav hakohen al chatas shechata is going. That's mentioned after aktoris emurim. That's why we don't want to bring it from over there. It's referring to aktorah maybe. Okay. Either way, zug da heilige gemur about it. Ashkan shinoi kodesh. So far we have shinoi kodesh. That you have to shecht it. You have to be mekabel the dam. You have to be zoyrikit l'shem chatas. Shinoi ba'olim and olan. How do I know shinoi ba'olim? Amakra. Olav, shed v'chipper olav leil chaveroi. Okay. Ashkan la mitzvah, very nice. That's la mitzvah. L'katchila la'akev minolan. How do I know that it's ma'akev? If you take a dir shina bailam by chatas, it's ma'akev. It's possible. Kedom baravuna bereder of Yeshua chatas chatasoi. Yeah, it says the word chatasoi v'chipper olav hakam chatasoi extra vav. So so therefore over here it's chatas nazir, he darshans that way, so you can darshan it over here as well by regular chatas. Okay, ashka mitzvah shina kodesh. So far you have sources to teach us that it's a mitzvah to do all the avodas of a chatas l'shem chatas. Zrika b'shina balim ben la mitzvah ben la'akev, and you have sources for zrika that you have to do it l'shem the balim evenly kuva. But la'akev b'chol avodas b'shina kodesh u'b'shar avodas b'shina balim bein lemitzvah bein la'akev min olan. How do I know that all the avodas that you do by chatas, if you don't do it l'shma, it's ma'akev. If you don't do l'shem the chatas, it's ma'akev. And also b'shar avodas zrika, I know has to be l'shem the balim. How do I know the other avodas? It has to be l'shem the balim min olan. Rabbi Yoel asya mechatas nazir. I learned from chatas nazir chsiv. Chatas Nazir, it says that all the avodas have to be l'shem chatas. So once I already know that a chatas has to be l'shem chatas, why does it have to repeat by chatas nazir that it has to be l'shem chatas? Must be that all the avoidus by a chatas has to be l'shma leikuva, right? It's repeating this halacha, although I already know shchita, kabbalah, and zrika by regular chatas has to be l'shma mitzvah. How do I know it's leikuva? From the fact that Torah repeats by chatas nazir, v'hikr b'akon t'nei shem osas chatas l'osas shikola siyosav l'shem chatas. Yeah, but osas chatasoi. Ashkan shina kodesh. So far I know that you have to do it l'shem chatas. Shina balam and all. How do I know you have to do it for the owner? Right, l'shem the owner. Right, I guess we know zrika bein la mitzvah bein la ikuva. Right, we already learned zrika. Right, it says olav and chatasai, an extra vav. How do the other avoiders? You have to do it l'shem balam, and if it's not l'shem balam, it's ma'akev. Ravun B'Rav Yeshua, it says over there v'osa es achatas. Could have said v'osa chatas chatasai. The extra vav is mashma that all the avoiders have to be l'shem the nazir chatasai. It has to be done. All the kol asiyas have to be l'shem the chatas. Problem is over here, and I see Rashi talks about it, that, okay, so you have Shar Avoidus by Shina Bailam, you know, mitzvah. But how do you know Le'ikuva? Right? Because the Gemara's kasha was, by Shina Bailam, Bein mitzvah, Bein La'akiv. How do I know? So now you just found me a source, mitzvah for all the Avoidus. Except for Zrika, I already know Le'ikuva. But the other Avoidus, now you have mitzvah. But how do I know Le'ikuva? The Gemara doesn't continue to probe on this. So Rashi says that once I know it from here, that it's la mitzvah, now I can compare it to shlomim. That just like by shlomim, there's no chilik between zrika and other avoidus. By shina bailan la mitzvah, so to by chatas, once I know zrika is leikuva, I can compare shar avoidus to zrika. It's all the same. Okay? Masker for Ravina. So Ravina asked Ravuna B'Rav Yeshua, oh, you're darshaning vavs, elamiata oilas oilasem ad darshan be. What are you going to darshan with the vav of oilas? It says oilas, so you could have said oilas. The Ravina, if Ravina is asking that, so every vav he darshans, minchas minchaso, nas chniska mad darshan bu, what's he going to darshan with those vavs? Says the Gemara, huma boile, minchasim and eskeim balaylo, that mincha and esachem can be brought even at night, even after hakrovas hakarbon, which has to be by day. That can be brought by night. Afilu lamachar. The second one teaches that it can even be brought the next day, the day after your makrivet. Okay, so that's what minchasai, the vav of minchasai and the vav of aniskai, teaches. But elo oilas elasai darshan be. But that's why he's asking from oilas elasai. What are you going to darshan from the vav of elasai? So the Gemara says, "Vesu mi gamrin me'adodi." Can you really learn a regular chatas from the dinam of a chatas nazir? Yeah, chatas chaylev mechatas nazir like gamri. You can't learn chaylev from nazir. You can't yeshem adom acherim because a nazir brings other karbanas as well. Besides, the chatas brings a oil and a shlamim. So you see that the chatas is more chashav. Right? There's a chumrah there. You have to bring other karbanas as well. And chatas nazir mechatas chaylev like gamra. You can't learn chatas nazir mechatas chaylev. Why not? You can't karas because chatas chaylev, right? It's zdoinoi karas. If a person eats b'mezet chaylev, right? There's karas. But a chatas nazir, person violates the halacha of nazirus. He drinks wine and walks into a cemetery. Let's say it's a lav. It's not karas. See, chaylev has a tzad chomer. Elo merova asya mechatas mitzayri. You can learn from chatas mitzayri. The chsiv v'osa koines achatas shekolos yosav l'shem chatas. Right? All the asiyas, all the avodas have to be l'shem chatas. That's what we learn from chatas mitzayri. So, so you see the machshavas of shaloi l'shma is ma'akiv. So the Gemara says ashkan shina kodesh. Okay, so I already have from a regular chatas mitzvah. So chatas mitzvah is teaching you le'ikuva, but that's only shina kodesh. It says kol asiyosav l'shem chatas. All the avodas have to be l'shem chatas But Shino Bailam Manole, how do I know by I don't know by Chatos Shino Bailam. So the Gemara says Amar Krov v'chiper al hamitayir. By Chatos Matzayir, over there it says also v'chiper al hamitayir that you should be mak of the carbon al manas to be mechaper for or on the matayir, the bailam, the laila matayir chavera, but not on somebody else. V'akatem miyalfim v'adodi asks the Gemara, okay, so now you found me a makar from Chatas Mitzayir, but you can't really learn Chatas Chayla from Chatas Mitzayir. Miyalf med Chatas Chayla, Chatas Mitzayir liyalf yishkein yeshem adom v'acherim. Again, Chatas Mitzayir has to bring other karbonis as well, and Asham and Ha'oila. Chatas Mitzayir and Chatas Chayla gam shekein karis, and Chayla is more chamer because it's karis b'mezid. So Gemara says mechod loy asya. You can't learn Chatas Chayla from either one Chatas Mitzayir, Chatas Nazir. Maybe you can learn Chatas Chaylev from Nazir and Mitzayra with a Me'atzad. So the Gemara says, 1 second. B'haylo lichtov. Yeah, it means really not just Nazir and Mitzayra. Right now we have, in all three places, in all three Chatois, yeah, you have the din of Lishma, you need Lishma, and Shina Bailam. Right? So the Gemara says, write it only by 2, and I could learn the third one from 2 together. You're right, I can't learn from just 1. But I could learn from between 2, I could learn the halacha that chatas, if it's lacking in l'shma, l'shem chatas, or l'shem de bailim, I can learn from there that it's ma'akiv. So the Gemara says, 1 second, slow down. B'haylo lichtav. So which one do you want to drop? If you're going to drop chatas chaylev, right, we don't need the din of l'shma. The Torah didn't have to then tell us the din of l'shma b'chatas chaylev. V'teisa ma'anach, and you learn of chatas nazir, chatas mitzayra, ma'al hanach sheken yishimam dam acherem. Has a chumrah. Can't really learn chatas chaylev from chatas nazir, chatas mitzayra, because chatas nazir, chatas mitzayra both bring other karbanos with it as well. So maybe drop chatas nazir and learn chatas nazir from chaylev and mitzayra. Ma'al hanach sheken ein lehen she'ela. There's a chumrah. You can't be shoyal on chaylev or on Mitzayra. Nazir yeshla b'sha'ela, right? You can be shoyl on Naziris. You go to a Chacham, it can be oiked in Naziris l'mafreya. So if you're not going to write Chatz Mitzayra, Teisa Mahanach, and you learn from Chaylev and Nazir, Ma'al Hanach Shekein, Ein Bon Bedalus. Right? Chatz Mitzayra has the advantage, it's a carbon oil of a yoyred, that depends on your financial status. Based on how much you can afford, you could bring different carbonas in proportion with what you can afford. So if your mamash very poor, you bring a mincha. If you're not so poor, you bring oifus. If you're really wealthy, then you can bring a behema. But that's only by a chatas mitzayra that has that kula. But chatas nazir and chatas chaylev don't have that kula, and memela it's more chamer, so you can't learn chatas mitzayra from them. Elo makro, says the Gemara. So what's the makar? That the din of lishma is ma'akav by chatas, because the Torah says zois ha-Torah la'oila v'la mincha hikisha akasav l'shlamim. Right? The Torah bundles together all the karbanas in that pasuk, and so we're makish it all to shlamim. Ma shlamim ben shina kodesh ben shina bailam beinan l'shman l'mitzvah. Avchatas ben shina kodesh ben shina bailam beinan l'shman l'mitzvah. So just like all the avodas by a shlamim have to be l'shman l'mitzvah, so too by a chatas, whether it's shina kodesh shina bailam have to be l'shman l'mitzvah hilkach mitzvah mishlamim. So I already know that it has to be l'shma l'shem chatas and l'shem the bailam that brought it from shlamim, because there's a hekesh to shlamim. V'hanach kroi la'akiv. And each one, chatas nazir, chatas mitzayra, and chatas chaylev, the fact that we have more drashas doubling down in their respective parshias, teaching us that they need to be l'shma, so that doubling down by each chatas teaches that it's taka ma'akiv, it's not just a mitzvah. Says the Gemara v'ashkin chatas chaylev d'chsiv ba'ala chatas. Yeah, Gemara says we have another makar. Yeah, we have a makar for chatas chaylev, as we spoke. So it says v'shochat oisol chatas. That's the drasha. You have to shecht l'shem chatas. Asks the Gemara, there are more kinds of chatas. Chatas d'avodas kichavim, right? Person does avodah zara. The halacha is, right? it has to bring a seira. It has to bring a seira. Right? A regular chatas can be from a kizber seira. He has to bring a seira, just a seira, b'averis kachavim. Okay, so chatz b'averis kachavim, the shmiya sakol, abitus v'sayim v'tomas migdra kadashav. Right? That's all chatas, carbon oil of a yored, but you bring a chatas. The loik sivbu, and they don't have mentioned there in their respective parashiyas that it needs to be lishma. So how do you know it's lekuv over there? I know that it's lemitzvah from the Hakesh Teshlomim, but now I have to find sources by each chatas where the Torah doubles down by each chatas and says again some type of drasha that you need it lishma, you need it to be lishma. So I have chatas chaylev, chatas nazir, chatas mitzayra, but what about chatas davay zara and shmi eskol b'tzis v'sayim v'tomas migdra kadashav? Says the Gemara, chatas davay zchav ma'asim chatas chaylev. Now I can learn matzat from chatas chaylev shkein kares kamoisa. They're both bekaris, b'mezit. Ha'anach kuli, and the other ones. Right, the carbon oil of a yored of shmias kol b'tzis v'sayim v'tomas migdra kadashav is asim b'matzad. I can learn from matzad from chatas chaylev, chatas nazir, chatas mitzayra. They're all chatois and lishmaz le'ikuva. So to carbon oil of a yored, which is a chatas, lishmaz le'ikuva. Okay. So the Gemara weiter. Ton Rabbanon Pesach bizmanoi. The Mishnah said Pesach bizmanoi. This is a brisa, but the first Mishnah also we saw this. Mishnah said that a Pesach bizmanoi, right? That's when you need lishma. Lishma is kosher, lishma is possible. But the brisa adds b'sha'ar yemois hashana, yeah, and the rest of the year, as far as not the Mishnah, is in the brisa. B'sha'ar yemois hashana lishma possible is fakert. If you shecht in Cheshvan, let's say, on another day of the year, not Erev Pesach on the 14th after Chatzos. Yeah, Shari Masashana, you shecht a carbon l'shem Pesach. It's possible. Shaloi l'shmai, but if you shecht it l'shem carbon acher, then it's kosher b'toyre shlamim. Now the Gemara says Manan Emili. Rashi says, what's Manan Emili? How do I know that b'shari Masashana shaloi l'shma is kosher? How do I know that? So the Gemara, Amar Rav Shmuel, Amar Krov, Im atzoin carbon l'zevach shlamim l'Hashem. It says, V'im min atzoin carbon l'zevach shlamim l'Hashem. What does V'im min atzoin mean? Dover abo min atzoin. It's referring to a carbon that comes only from tzoin. Tzoin is basically sheep or goats. What carbon can only be brought from kvasim and izam, from sheep or goats? A carbon Pesach. Why? Because a real shlamim can be brought even from bakar. Can bring a bull for shlamim, right? Can't bring a bull for carbon Pesach. So if it says v'im min atzoin, it limits it to tzoin. Yeah, we're talking about really a carbon Pesach. And l'zevach shlamim l'Hashem. What does it mean that a carbon Pesach can be brought as shlamim? It means a carbon Pesach shaloi bezmanoi, right? It's after the 14th chatzos, right? After you missed that window of bringing it bezmanoi. So now it's shaloi bezmanoi. And let's say after Pesach. And you take that original carbon Pesach, which was supposed to be shechted as a carbon Pesach, but the Zman passed, and now you want to be makriv it stam. So now if you shecht it, it's yehei lezevach shlamim. It becomes a shlamim. So the Gemara says, Eim shlamim men midachrin aloi. So maybe only if you shecht it, b'torah shlamim, right? Shaloi bezmana, shaloi l'shma, meaning you shecht it b'torah shlamim, then yehei lezevach shlamim. But what if you shecht it for a chatas, or an asham, or an oila? What are you going to tell me? That it also is oila b'torah shlamim, it has a din shlamim? Maybe midachrin aloi. Where do you see in the pasuk that even if you shecht the carbon pesach shaloi bezmana, shaloi l'shma, l'shem chatas or l'shem oila, it's also a shlamim. Rabbi Yoel lezevach l'rabbis kol zevach. It says lezevach. Lezevach is marbo all kinds of zvachim. Even if you shecht it, extra word over there lezevach. Even if you shecht it for a chatas, an oila, it's still shlamim l'Hashem. Asks the Gemara, Emo kol de shachit lavikamoisa. So one second, if you have a riboy akra from lezevach, then why is it a shlamim? Lezevach is marba that even if you shecht it lechatas, so let it have a teiras chatas. Or if you shecht it la'oila, let it have a teiras oila. Mechates should be a shlamim. So the Gemara says, Iva ksiv l'shlamim v'zevach. If you would have said v'zevach after shlamim, and now you would marba zevach from zevach, that even if you shecht it for another type of carbon, it works, then I would have said, Ketika Amrit, you're right. If you shecht it for another type of carbon, from lezevach, you learn that it could be a chatas if you had in mind for a chatas, or oil if you had in mind for an oil. But ashta dechsiv lezevach shlomim. But now that it says lezevach before the shlomim, you know why shlomim follows lezevach? To tell you lechol deshachet lei. It doesn't matter what you shechted b'toiras. If you shechted b'toiras chatas or an oil or an osham, shlomim liyava. It's always going to take on the classification of a shlomim. Yeah, and asks the Gemara, Ema lezevach klal shlomim prat. Still limited to a shlomim because zevach is a klal and shlomim is a prat. Klal prat ein bechlal ela mashem beprat. So shlomim en midach min eloi, which means that only if you shecht it l'shem shlomim, right? Lezevach doesn't mean any if shecht it b'toiras chatas or oil or asham. It means lezevach klal shlomim is prat. Only if you shecht it b'toiras shlomim, that's when it has a din shlomim. But other than that, it's not kosher. So when it says no, la Hashem v'ater v'cholal. Right afterwards is another klal. It's a klal prat klal, lezevach shlomim la Hashem. So klal prat klal has to be only ke'ena prat. Okay, it doesn't mean mamish the prat. Maskov la Rabbi Yaakov nar pekoy de lo domi klal basel l'chlol l'kama. Still, even if you go with klal prat klal, it's not a good klal prat klal because the last klal is much more inclusive than the first klal. They're not similar. Klol l'kama mar bezvachim besuloi. The lezevach is marba just any type of zevach, any type of behema, carbon. Klala basro la Hashem, kol de la Hashem, bafilu lo'ifas, bafilu lo'menachos. It's marba anything that is brought to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is even oifas or menachos. So it's a much more expansive klal. If it's much more expansive klal, it's not similar to the first one. You can dash on klal prat klal. Says the Gemara, no, Rabbi Shmuel v'chol prat darsh ge'ai gavna. No, Rabbi Shmuel doesn't mind such a klal prat klal. Yeah, klal prat klal yatan el kana prat. So mamela, you only need ke'ena prat. It's not mamish the prat. Ma prat mefurish shu shaloi l'shmoi v'kasher. Just like the prat is mefurish and it's shaloi l'shma and it's kosher, right? It says shlomim, and we're dealing with a pesach because it's an imin atzoin. So you're dealing with a pesach l'shem shlomim. Av kol shu shaloi l'shmoi v'kasher. So too, any other type of shaloi l'shma, meaning you take a pesach and you shecht it for another type of shaloi l'shma, chatas or asham or an oilo, it's still kosher and it gets a toiras shlomim. Where it says, Ima prat mefurish dover abo beneder ubenedova av kol abo beneder ubenedova oilo shlomim en chatas v'asham loy. Maybe once you say ke'ena prat, so maybe it's only if a guy shechts it, yeah? Ke'ena prat, meaning shaloi l'shma. What's the shaloi l'shma ke'ena prat? Shlomim, right? So shlom is baba neder nedava. So the shaloi l'shma has to be a type of carbon that's baba neder nedava. So it's only an oil, but not a chatas and the asham. Says the Gemara, Elo lezevach rebuyu. Forget the whole klal prat klal business. We're not going with that b'chlal. We're going with a riboy. It's an extra word on the Torah. It says lezevach. Yeah? And that's marba any kind of zevach. Chatas, osham, oila. Right? Any kind of zevach. It works, it's kosher. If you take a carbon pesach, shaloi bezmanu, you shechter for any kind of Hashem, any kind of zevach, it takes on a Torah shlomim. So the Gemara asks, one second, once you have a riboy, so eim lachol deshachet leila have a kavasei, very similar shaklavatarit that we just had earlier. So if it's mamash a riboy akros, so let it take on the classification, the Torah of whatever carbon you had in mind for. Yeah, if it's a chatas, let it take on a din chatas. Omer Rabav in doichin kachem necholim etzel kachem necholin, vein doichin kachem necholin etzel kachem she'ein necholin. We want to be matcha this carbon, right? This carbon Pesach, original carbon Pesach, that you're makriv shaloi bezmana after Pesach. Shaloi l'shma. Suppose the shaloi l'shma is a chatas or an oila. We don't want it to take on that din of a chatas and an oila because Pesach is kachem and necholin, right? You could eat a carbon Pesach. Shlamim also the baila meats. So we want to be matchir etzel kachem that are necholin and not etzel kachem that are not necholin. Asks the Gemara, Otu chatas v'asham mila misachli. What do you mean chatas and asham are necholin? Why can't it take on the din of a chatas and asham? Right? Zichrei kuhuna could eat chatas and asham. Ela doichin kachem necholin l'chol odom. Etzel kachem necholin l'chol odom. Ve'en doichin kachem necholin l'chol odom. Etzel kachem she'ene cholin l'chol odom. Yeah, your doicha only. You're only doicha. You doicha the Pesach to a type of carbon when it's shaloi l'shma. You make it take on the halachas of a type of carbon that is Nechal and Nechal Adam, and that is a Shlamim. Rabbi Yosi Berb Oven Omar Doichen Kachem Kalam Etzel Kachem Kalam Vein Doichen Kachem Kalam Etzel Kachem Kadeshim. He says that you want to be Doiche Kachem Kalam, which is Pesach. Pesach is Kachem Kalam, Shlomim is Kachem Kalam, so they're similar. So Mamatchet, if it's Shaloi Lishma, Shaloi Bizman Shaloi Lishma, you make it take on the halachas of Kachem Kalam, Vein Doichen Kachem Kalam Etzel Kachem Kadeshim, but you don't make it take on the halachas of Kachem Kadeshim. So now Gemara is going to go to town over here with 4 kashas, because Shlomim is not the only form of kachem kalam. You have other types of kachem kalam. So 1 second. If you shach l'shem meiser, meiser is kachem kalam, let it take on the dinim of meiser behema. L'may hilchasa, and be a big nafkamina. Because l'leboy nesachim. Because meiser behema doesn't need nesachim, like shlamim. Ulamilka le'beloy yigol. And if you're poida meiser behema, you get malchus. It says lo yigol, it's a lav. So it would really make a huge nafkamina la'alacha whether this Pesach, Shaloi Bizmanoi, Shaloi L'Shma L'Shem Meiser, for example, would take on the halachas of a carbon Meiser, Meiser Behema, or the halachas of a Shlomim. If it takes on Meiser Behema, then it's a whole different story. It doesn't need Nesachim, it's allowed to be poided. On my cross, the Gemara says, no, it can't take on Meiser Behema because Asiri Yakoidesh, Zeh Meiser Ve'enacha Meiser. Only this could be Meiser and nothing else could be Meiser. That's the Xeris HaKos of Asiri Yakoidesh. Ask them, so Bechor is also Kachem Kalam. So maybe if you shechted a Pesach Shloi Bizman Shaloi Lishma, which means L'Shem Bechor, let's just say, let it take on the halachas of Bechor. Why are you running to Shlomim? L'may Hilchasa. Again, a very big nafkaminu, L'labay Nesachim. Is no Nesachim. Inami, the Leis V'la Kahanim, to be able to give it to Kahanim. Bechor is Matnas Kahuna. The Gemara says, no, Bechor Nami, Evra, Avara, Memaiser Gomer. It's Xer Shava. Avar, and just like my meiser, it's only zeh, hasiru yakoidesh zeh meiser. So to from this ger shava, this is a bechar, is unique to a bechar. Mamish, the firstborn of an animal, and that is the only type of animal that can take on the halachas of bechar. Ve'im meshach l'shem t'mura levet t'mura. Third kasha t'mura, yeah. Let's say you have a carbon of hektish. You makdish a carbon, let's just say l'shem shlamim, whatever, and then you want to be machlif, you want to exchange the kedusha from this animal to a different animal. That's a lav in the Torah. It says you're not allowed to do it, and if you do it, v'hayahu usmarasa yia kodesh. The Torah says that they both take on the kedusha, and that's the kedusha's t'mura. So let's say shechtzit l'shem t'mura. He wants this Pesach shaloi bizmanoi to take on chveis l'shem t'mura. He shechtzit as if it's a t'mura. L'may ilchas al milkale. He's going to get malchus. Why? Because the Isser of Tmura is to be Meichal, Kedushas Tmura. Yeah, on a behema, and here, when he shechts it l'shem that, it'll take on the Kedusha of Tmura. Okay? Inami, Lamekam ale b'lo yimacher b'lo yigoel. Also, as an Isser to sell it, to be paid it. So, very different than Shlamim. Amrazut Shabbat Rav Nachman Makravu, Hoyu hu ismarasai. Zut Tmura ve'inachet Tmura. Again, also similar to Meiser. Behema with that it says over there Asiri Yakoidesh Dafka. This one here also who is Mirasai Yakoidesh. Only a Tmura can take on, an actual Tmura can take on the halachas of Tmura and nothing else. Okay, fourth kasha. Toida is also kachem kalam. So if a guy takes a Pesach Shloi Bizmanoi shech l'shem toida, let it take on the halachas of a toida, not of a shlamim. Lamai hilchasa. Difference would be latino lechem. Toida has to be brought with lechem. The Gemara says, no, you can't say that. Because Mika Mida the Pesach Gofei, Loi Boye Lechem, Umoisoroi Boye Lechem. Carbon Pesach itself doesn't need Lechem, right? Probably also to bring Lechem, right? It's Chametz. Right? When he shech the Carbon Pesach, after Chatzos, it's already a time where you can't eat Chametz. So you want the moister of the Carbon Pesach, which means the Pesach Shaloi Bizmanoi, to require lechem. What do you mean? Now that you're making it into a shlamim, so now it's also different than a Pesach, because a Pesach doesn't need nesachim. Shlamim needs a nesachim. So the Gemara says, you're right. You misunderstood the question. And what I meant to say was, suppose you have a toida, I guess they got lost, you brought another one, and now you have this leftover toida. You don't know what to do with it. So you're makriv it as a shlamim, but you don't bring lechem like the original toida. So a moiser toida doesn't need lechem. If you moiser the asilu ma'alma, so you want to tell me a moiser that came from Pesach, the yishechted l'shem toida, should require lechem, boy lechem? That doesn't make any sense. So b'meila, these four types of kachim kalam, meiser behema, bechar, tamura, and toida, cannot. This Pesach can't take on any of these dinim. Okay, we'll stop over here.